Welcome to The Know, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Adam.
And we're doing something a little bit different today. We got some information about the PS5 that's coming out, and there's a lot we want to talk about there. There's a lot of different things that we can weigh as far as likelihood about the different information. So we wanted to sit down and talk about it and not just read through the information and leave it at that. So that said, let's read through the information. Quick summary is that a site called Semi-Accurate. It's a tech blog. It runs on a subscription model for $1,000, which I don't have. So instead, we're working with some basic summarizing information from people who do have $1,000, which does introduce a certain level of risk, but we don't have $1,000. So here's the thing, here's the reason that people are paying attention to this information. This comes from Semi-Accurate, and the writer, Charlie Demerjian, has been right about the hardware of just about every device available this generation, well ahead even of their announcements. So from the sounds of it, they've got contacts in the hardware industry that can give them a heads up on what's happening. To give you an example, back in 2012, they had some early specs about PS4's architecture. In 2011, they had information about Xbox One's architecture. In 2013, which was the year that PS4 came out, they were already calling the iterative hardware refresh for PS4, which I think after the previous generation, when we were getting new models like the Xbox 360 Slim and all that, we started to get used to iterative consoles in the generation, so that wasn't a huge surprise, but they still had that information earlier than anyone else with their sources. And they also reported on the Switch having Tegra integration months ahead of anyone else. So they've got a lot of things right. There are reasons to listen to these guys.
Have they gotten anything, how much have they gotten wrong?
Well, they don't talk about that very much, but for the most part, hardware-wise, they've been pretty accurate.
Okay.
So there's reasons to at least pay attention to this. Doesn't necessarily mean that everything we're getting out of this is 100% accurate.
It might be semi-accurate. It's the joke.
But we'll break down into what I think is like more believable and maybe less believable. So on the more believable front, Semi-Accurate is claiming that the PS5 will have an 8-core Zen CPU and a Navi-based GPU, both of them custom, which not that surprising to have something slightly customized for a console. That a lot of dev kits are already out in the wild, and that there's a lot of design being geared toward PlayStation VR optimization. Thoughts on that? Both of the current consoles are working with AMD at the moment. So that it makes sense if they were going to continue it into the next generation that's what they'd be using, right? Or do you follow Ryzen and Zen and the Navi?
Not like closely. Okay. I mean, I find it interesting that the part about that they're gearing a lot towards VR development, that seems a little hard to believe for me.
I don't know about that necessarily. I actually think that is one of the more believable ones because PlayStation VR is now more or less the market leader for VR. They've sold over 2 million PlayStation VR headsets. They're the one platform that seems to be doing quite well sales-wise.
Yeah.
And they've just launched a couple new VR games, or are getting ready to launch a couple new VR games that are doing, like, they're getting really great feedback, Wipeout being one of them.
Yeah, the thing is that, like, I see that, like, if any company is going to pour money into VR, Sony is a very plausible one because of how well they're doing and, like, the amount of games and users that they have. But I feel like we are sort of seeing, like, at first it was like a waterfall of games and now it's sort of a trickle. But, I mean, maybe they're just pulling their punches and waiting for the next generation. But
it is true that there are a couple of shortcomings to PlayStation VR as it stands now.
Yeah.
I really like the PlayStation VR headset. It is probably the most comfortable of the headsets. It fits quite well. It does all that pretty great. But for me, it's really held back by the current PlayStation camera and the Move controllers.
I just think it would be an interesting choice. Like, I don't think it's out of the question for them to, like, have more VR stuff with the PS5, but I think putting a primary focus on that, I feel like because it's still a niche market, it seems a little not out of the question, but like less plausible than just like there will be a PlayStation VR, but it's not going to be the core of this. Like, it's not going to be the core focus of the system.
I don't know that this is necessarily saying that it's going to be the core of the system so much as support will be built in.
Gotcha.
Again, because we're working with a summary, we don't have the full $1,000 rundown. But they're saying design is geared towards PlayStation VR optimization.
Got it.
So they want to do better with VR, and I think that's good. I think that's a good direction for PlayStation 5. As far as the architecture, not hugely surprising. Like I said, AMD is in both Xbox One and PlayStation 4 right now.
Nothing would really surprise me on that front unless they said that they were bringing back cell processors.
Yeah, probably not. And then Navi actually isn't even out yet. It's the successor to Vega, and that's expected later this year.
Okay.
So that kind of leads us into one of the elements that could be slightly less believable, which is the writer is suggesting that a 2018 release of PlayStation 5 is now the question based on the amount of dev kits that have already gone out. So they're saying there are a lot of dev kits out there, which I could definitely see as being possible, but they are claiming that this indicates a release of PlayStation 5 this year. And that I find to be a little bit more of a stretch.
Yeah, the fact that there are dev kits out in the wild, like you can infer that, you can infer whatever you want, but I think saying that like, just because there's a ton of systems out there doesn't mean like, it's gonna release this year. Like maybe they're just giving people extra development time, a head start to make sure that like there's more games for it.
Well, it also depends, I don't know exactly when these dev kits would have gone out, but who is making a game in less than a year?
Right.
No, not one that we want to play, probably. Right. So now, on the one hand, that does seem to be more the writer's speculation,
sure.
And based on where the dev kits are at the moment. So that one is maybe less part of the information itself than just an extrapolation. In addition to dev kits not necessarily being the biggest indication, this seems like a weird year for Sony to bring out the PS5, given how well the PS4 is doing.
We're still like riding a super wave of awesome PS4 exclusives, and like PS4 Pro just recently launched. I just don't see it releasing this year. Maybe like fall of 2019 is a plausible release date, but
2019, 2020 is a window that we hear a lot.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't surprise me too much. But yeah, just this year, Sony is putting out Spider-Man, and that's coming out. We now have a release date for that of September 7th. God of War, and Detroit Become Human, which is coming out May.
Yeah.
So they've already got a lot of exclusives, and that's just the ones that we know about. And that's not including what is going to be announced at E3. Then they've got a bunch of games for some time after this year. Days Gone got delayed out of 2018 into 2019. The Last of Us 2, which we don't have a date for yet. Ghost of Tsushima. Death Stranding, which we also don't know what's going on with that yet as far as release. So are those now all PS5 games, or are they console generation bridges,
split,
or are they PS4 games because the PS5 is not coming out yet?
Yeah, it's hard to speculate that, but I don't know. I would be super surprised if a PS4 5 released this year.
Right. And look, PS4, they just announced recently that they've passed 76 million units sold. They're on track to outsell PS2, which up to this point was their by far best-selling console. So this is a huge generation for PlayStation. I don't know why they would cut it short when so far it all seems to be working very well and not slowing down.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time we've heard 2018 as a potential time frame. Back in 2015, there was a source from AMD that said they were working on next generation console architecture and that they were planning on delivering it in 2018. So that's something to consider. And we do know that PlayStation is planning on another generation. They're not going to just, be doing PlayStation 4 Pros and iterating forever. That was one iteration during the generation, and then they're going to plan on a new one. In an interview with Golem.de, Sean Layden said specifically the PS4 Pro is just a mid-generation refresh to take advantage of 4K. And so they are planning a proper generation. We know that. And Macquarie research analyst Damien Thong published a report predicting record profits for Sony by March 2019, fueled in part by the release of a new PlayStation console. So they are expecting it probably holiday 2018 as well. Or maybe early 2019, but it makes more sense to release a console before the holiday period. The only other thing, I guess, is if you want to listen to analyst Michael Pachter, he's been right about some things and he has been less right about some things. But he last year said that I think PS5 will be another half step. I think they'll build a console that will be backwards compatible with PlayStation 4 Pro, so I think it'll be perceived by the consumers to be a half step. And I think Sean's telling the truth when he says it'll be a full-fledged console, and he thought that maybe 2019. But based on this new report, he's actually guessing 25% chance 2019, 75% chance 2020 that we actually see the PS5.
Interesting.
So, what do you want out of a PS5? What do you want it to do that PlayStation 4 can't do right now? You just want it beefier?
There's not like a whole lot that I'm missing with the PlayStation 4. Honestly, the reason that I limit my console playing is because it doesn't match up with a high-end PC in terms of performance. So yeah, beefier is probably the biggest thing. That's really like the only problem I have with the consoles is like you look at games that on PC versus on console, and it's such a stark difference. Like I'm playing a 3-year-old game, playing The Witcher 3, and I'm playing it on a PC, and it looks goddamn gorgeous, solid 60 frames a second. And I saw footage from a PS4, and I was like, this is actually painful. And so if they can alleviate some of those problems, sure. But again, that's not always what the consoles do.
Well, it's also
because it's trying to reach a broader market than a PC.
True, and it's also not necessarily something that's actually going to happen because cutting-edge PC hardware will always be farther along than console generations. One, in terms of affordability. Cutting-edge PC hardware costs a lot more, as anyone who's trying to buy like a 1080 right now can tell you, because the prices are still soaring over the cryptocurrency miners. But the consoles are the affordable option, and what they get out of that is because they are a consistent hardware configuration, developers can get more out of the hardware than most PC optimization will be able to do for something equivalent.
Totally.
But they will always be weaker.
Yeah,
I mean, but I don't think it's going to fully make up the gap. Ever.
The reason I do play my PS4 is because Sony has like killed it this generation with exclusives, like absolutely like dominated. Like there's games that I can only play on my PS4, and I do so. So if the new console could bring more of those, sure. But there's not much else I can really think of. I mean, I'm sure you probably want like VR, better VR compatibility, or what do you want?
Yeah, I'm always for more power. I think that Spider-Man for PlayStation 4, they just revealed some more details about that today, like that it's going to be locked at 30 frames per second for both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. And that means that they'll be able to, they know exactly what they're working with, they'll be able to make everything else look nicer, but there's going to be a lot of people who want 60.
Especially when you're swinging through a city, man.
Right, sure. So I think that beefier hardware always comes into it with consoles from that perspective. I think that if they can make a better VR experience, they will get even better adoption rates. PlayStation VR is the only one that's done great so far. Moving a couple million headsets is not bad. It's decent. It's a good start. So if they can actually refine it and tweak it and support it from the ground up with PS5, that'll be great. But I don't see that being such a huge priority on their part that they need to get it out this year.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think about all this potential information about PlayStation 5. Do you think it's coming this year? Do you think we need it this year? And also what you think about the information itself. It's said to be running the 8-core Zen CPU, a Navi-based GPU, and if that is something that you think you'll be happy with for the next generation of PlayStation. And if you like this video, please let us know. This is something new that we're trying, so we want to get as much feedback as we can. It's something we've been working on internally for a couple of months now, but we decided that we wanted to talk about this today, so we're trying it externally. So let us know what you think about it, and any feedback that you have, any suggestions. We will absolutely be reading the comments and taking them on board. And if you want to get more content like this, please make sure that you give us the thumbs up. And if you have not been to this channel before, consider subscribing. We talk about video games all the time.